everybody, welcome to our video today. Today we are going to talk about a very strange true crime case from the United Kingdom that involves internet chat rooms, MI6 spies, catfishing, and the tragic stabbing of a 14-year-old boy. This case has been widely covered in different articles, documentaries, and true crime podcasts, and I wanted to cover it here as well. I did list this one as an option in a previous video for you guys to vote on, and this one got the most votes, so here we are. Before we jump into the video, as always, that you guys probably know my 2 requests, please check out the pinned post in the comments, which is what will list 3 cases that I am interested in covering and want your vote to know which one you guys would like to hear the most, so I can start working on it sooner than later and get that released for you. And then request number 2, if you enjoy the content that you see and listen to on my channel, or if you like today's video, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. That concludes my requests, so let's hold on to your seats because this story will blow you away. So this case is going to follow the story of 2 boys by the name of John and Mark that are addicted to an internet chat room. In that chat room, they develop a close friendship and ultimately meet in real life and hit it off. But what happens next is more shocking and extraordinary than anything you could ever imagine. So, most of us are likely familiar with the term catfishing. It's usually associated with someone using a fake identity to lure someone into a relationship, typically for financial benefit, but not always financial. In the MI6 catfishing case that we will talk about today, a teenager was convinced to kill by the very person he was meant to murder. I'm gonna say that again. A teenager was convinced to kill by the very person he was meant to murder. This is a wild one, you guys. For those of you that are not familiar with MI6, it is the secret intelligence service in the United Kingdom, and it's tasked mainly with the covert overseas collection and analysis of human intelligence in support of the United Kingdom's national security. Its headquarters are in London, and it's kind of, from what I'm gathering, it's very similar to like the United States FBI and CIA kind of a thing. Like it's in that realm of organizations. So in Manchester, England, in 2003, a 16-year-old boy, known only as Mark due to his age, became besotted by a housewife named Janet Dobinson on an internet chat room. She described herself as a woman in her 40s who, unbeknownst to her husband, was actually an agent and spy for MI6. Over many months, Mark became obsessed with Janet, and their online relationship grew to the point that Janet had begun to trust Mark that he could keep her secrets. She would explain that if he could pass some MI6 and initiation tests that he could become a powerful MI6 asset and spy. She told Mark that if he passed one final test, then he would be paid £30,000, taken to visit the Queen, and take part in a meeting with the then Prime Minister, Tony Blair. The final test was to be a secret bodyguard to a VIP named James Bell, who knew the code to a large safe at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean that, if opened, could end the monarchy. So, clearly, the stage that is set and the picture that is painted is heavy. It's heavy. It shows the importance and the risk and the scandal that could come from all of this. And it goes to show what, allegedly MI6 could be involved in. Coincidentally, James Bell lived only 3 miles away from Mark, and even more coincidentally, happened to be Mark's new friend, 14-year-old John. But unknown to Mark, Janet was simply a fake online identity of John's, who was planning for his own friend to murder him for MI6. But it was not the only fake identity. Mark was using an MSN chat room dedicated to Manchester teens when he was messaged by a 16-year-old girl named Rachel, who he pretty quickly took a liking to. However, unbeknownst to Mark, this 16-year-old girl was also John. In fact, John had created 6 different identities to converse with Mark specifically. Rachel had given Mark a fake photo and tried to meet up with him on multiple occasions, but every time would make excuses for not showing up. Now, when I say that Rachel, aka John, tried to meet up with him on multiple occasions, that obviously was never the intention, because Rachel did not exist. Rachel, again, aka John, created someone called Kevin, who ended up chatting with Mark. In this storyline, Kevin would be Rachel's stalker, and in February of 2003, Kevin kidnaps Rachel and holds her hostage. Now, if Mark wanted her back, then he would have to do something very inappropriate, if Mark wanted Rachel back, then he would need to do something for Kevin. But Kevin's request is horribly inappropriate, abusive, and manipulative. The demand was that Mark would need to masturbate on a live webcam for him, and precious little Mark followed Kevin's orders so he could rescue Rachel, this girl that he had never met but very much cared for. A few days later, Kevin said that Rachel had been kidnapped again and sexually assaulted before Kevin had murdered her. At this time in the storyline, Mark is introduced to Rachel's little brother John, the real John who chatted to Mark as himself. With no one else to turn over to his grief, both John and Mark became friends, met in real life to comfort each other over the death of John's fake sister, Rachel. But suddenly, Rachel would return to the chat, claiming that she had been in a coma and had given birth to a baby, and that it was Mark's. But of course, Mark and Rachel never met in person. So Mark denies that this could be his baby. Weeks later, Mark received a post-dated message from Rachel, who claimed she was only trying to protect both Mark and John, and that if he had received this message, then she was already dead somewhere. It wasn't until John created Janet that things began to get out of hand. Unsurprisingly, Janet knew all of John's movements and relayed them back to Mark, who became even more convinced that Janet had a huge amount of inside knowledge, and that it was information that a spy would have. Of course, though, it was John detailing his own movements. Janet said that Manchester was a hub of British and foreign intelligence, and that everyone from the hairdresser to the ice cream man was involved in some way. Janet was priming Mark to be one of the best spies in the city, but she still needed proof that he was willing to accept the deal. The first test was to go to John's school and take him out of class for the day. Mark convinced his teachers that John had an urgent appointment, and both of them left to spend the day together, with Mark completely unaware that John was actually Janet. Janet came up with various tasks, including one mission that apparently had come direct from Tony Blair himself. And remember, Tony Blair was the Prime Minister at the time. She explained that James Bell had to be made to look gay. Mark would have to have oral sex with John, so the hidden spies and enemies around Manchester would acknowledge it, unwilling to go through with this. Mark initially went against the idea, but was convinced by Janet that these actions would be for the honor of the Queen and country, and of vital national security. So, Mark met John and went back to John's house, where they would perform oral sex on each other on the 29th of June in 2003. Mark was convinced to kill John as a matter of national security. Mark typed, "You want me to take him to Trafford Center and kill him in the middle of Trafford Center? ? The reply was simple and forceful from Janet. Yes. And so Mark agreed to kill his friend. Now, when Mark plunged the knife into 14-year-old John in Goose Green Alley, he said, "I love you, bro." John later would tell detectives that Mark lifted him to his feet and stabbed him again as he cried out for an ambulance, believing himself to be dying. And Mark was said to have responded with, quote, "People will hear. Please be quiet," end quote. And less than 24 hours later, John was fighting for his life in the hospital after being stabbed multiple times in what the police assumed have been day gone wrong. But little did they realize that a web of deceit had been spun so large that John had planned his own murder. When police reviewed the CCTV footage following John through Manchester to the town center, they watched Mark and John disappear down Goose Green Alley where John was found. 25 minutes later, Mark left the alley alone and called police, claiming that a hooded man had attacked them. The following day, the media, informed by police, put out an appeal looking for a hooded man in his early 20s, wearing black jeans, nothing like what Mark looked like. But Mark was already in custody, and due to his age, the police would not update the press with this information. Mark would plead guilty to the attempted murder, but he claimed he was working for MI6. And even more bizarrely, John was charged with inciting his own murder, which is a charge so rare it had never been heard in British court before. When interviewed in his hospital bed, John claimed that he had no idea why Mark had attacked him. John had been close to death and Mark might have been up on a murder charge, but John survived stab wounds to his kidney, liver, and gallbladder, which had to be removed. At first, police thought the story that Mark told of Janet and MI6 to be completely absurd, which I can understand that. However, that changed when they brought in criminal intelligence analyst Sally Hogg to comb through both Mark and John's computers. She would analyze about 60,000 lines of text generated between the two computers, which took her almost 6 weeks to do. She learns that John had found Mark to be gullible and felt that using the multiple identities was like taking drugs. He had become addicted to tricking Mark and created a multi-layered story within these identities. The judge in the trial would say, quote, "Skilled writers of fiction would struggle to conjure up a plot such as that which arises here," end quote. John had become so addicted and engrossed with the illusion that he had created that he skipped meals and stayed at his computer, simply needing to be on the internet to crave his chat room dramas. He would have many sleepless nights and typed the equivalent of 10 novels in his messages to Mark. The amount of data found on both computers relating only to the chat room equated to 133 gigabytes. So that data tells you how much thought went into this and how much correspondence there really was. Now, the people who witnessed this trial unfold were completely taken aback that a 14-year-old boy had created such a matrix of deceit, manipulating this unsuspecting boy into a web of deception that some really did liken to brainwashing. But the question still remained, why would a 14-year-old boy plan his own murder? And the truth is rather more tragic than and pretending he was a billionaire who knew the code to a chest full of wealth so large that it could overthrow the British monarchy. It appeared that John was the victim of his own criminality. Psychologists would report that he had not arranged his death out of wickedness, but out of fear. John was creating an alternate reality for himself, built on various identities that he would bring into his own reality. The mission of these characters was to keep Mark in constant contact with John. Sally Hogg said that each style of conversation for the identities were so distinct that she even believed that these were different people. Like, she knew that they weren't, but he was so skilled at creating like a language style, a communication style, a background for these people. It really came across like they were different people. Sally claimed that the continuity and memory of each identity was nothing less than phenomenal. John had a juvenile fascination with Mark that some people considered to be love, and in his own bizarre way, he was able to connect to Mark on a personal level and control him by using various made-up characters. And in the process of breaking down and understanding what had actually transpired, the web of weirdness was so large that police had dedicated an entire room with colored charts to work out what exactly transpired. Police later would argue that MSN themselves should have been held responsible, as there was no supervision available in the Manchester teen chat room, and really anyone could pose as whomever they liked, clearly. In 2003, internet anonymity was easier to pull off than it is today, and many privacy laws are now in place that were non-existent back then. When John was interviewed by a therapist, he told that therapist that he wanted to be dead. And after bringing his identities into his reality, he felt as though he had no true identity for himself and became so lost in all of the lies that he had created. So he thought, who better than the love of his life to kill him on a mission for his country. Now, this is not going to come as a surprise, but John was diagnosed with various mental health disorders after having grown up in an extremely broken household and a childhood raging of depression. He was bullied in school and was known to bottle up his emotions. Had this case been a straightforward stabbing, Mark would have been sentenced to many years in prison, but due to the very bizarre and unique state of this case, he was sentenced to serve probation in the community. John, who had the unusual status of being the first person charged and convicted of inciting their own murder, was sentenced to the same punishment. Both boys were not allowed to use the internet unless under full supervision from an adult, and were not allowed to contact each other. The story of Mark and John really did remain mostly hidden from the British media until after the trials had taken place. According to John's therapist, he would enter into a heterosexual relationship with a girlfriend, but ended up creating a web of lies around his life. He told his girlfriend that he was stabbed because he had identified a serial killer on the loose in Manchester. So this is a very unusual case of catfishing that is both tragic and insightful to an extent of how severe mental health problems can be and how much the internet can play a role in developing alternate identities under the false veil of anonymity. Nicholas Clark, who was the prosecutor in the trial, said, quote, "I am not aware of any other case where somebody's incited somebody to murder themselves. I would say of the two teenagers, John was the more wicked and more criminally culpable." End quote. Which I completely agree with. Like, I'm not saying that Mark is not in the wrong, because yes, he did stab John, but John was the mastermind behind this whole thing, and I absolutely agree that he was much more wicked. John would also explain that it was like feeding a dog when it came to Mark. Like, it was so easy and so simple for him to massively manipulate him into this murder plan. And overall, what the prosecutor and team would describe was that everything found on John's computer was like an internet soap opera, moving from one scene to another. Each character and storyline more fantastic than the last. The plots were extracted from what John had seen, both in films and in life. Thick with treachery, villainy, and betrayal. John's lawyer, Jonathan Goldberg, would claim that he was always a very gentle, slightly withdrawn man or young man with kind of a withdrawn personality. And that is why he would bring these characters to life in a reality that he was not really capable of living in the real world. And practically everyone that reviewed this case or was a part of it really did describe John as a boy that demonstrated a high level of apathy, like no emotion, no remorse. Like, obviously, so again, like, this was such a mental health case that psychologists were greatly intrigued by this case, but also like very alarmed by what this young man, teenager, was capable of creating. So that will conclude the case of the MI6 Catfishing case. Please, as always, let me know what you thought of this case. This one, I say this every time, this was a wild one. They're all wild, but this one to me is a different kind of intriguing. I am always personally very fascinated when cases surround mental health issues and disease and illness, like especially different personalities. If you've ever seen the movie Split, like, it showcases when people have personality disorders and the level of detail and depth that is identified with each personality it's actually amazing and so fascinating. Obviously, it's not good when somebody is harmed or assaulted. I'm not saying that that's okay by any means, but the background to it all that can explain why these kind of things happen is what fascinates me. So, please let me know your thoughts. Again, check out the pinned comment below in the comment section and let me know which of the 3 cases sounds the most interesting to you.